welcome to Reptile Fight Club. Welcome back. I was looking back at our old the episodes we've done recently, and it's kind of sparsing, thinning out a little bit, but that's all right. We'll press on. I'm here, and with me as always is Mr. Bob Rock. Rob Stone, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Yeah, I think we'll pick back through it. I think it was the trip, kind of, right? It got things adjacent, and that's sort of how it always goes, right? I mean, that's the thing that Eric and I have talked about, for the going on 13 years that he's been doing it, is that it's whatever that schedule is, it's sticking to the schedule that then basically reflects whether podcasts continue or not. I mean, either way, you're well past the average length, seven episodes or whatever of most podcasts don't make it past that point. But yeah, I mean, that's usually the problem, right? Is it's actually the schedule. And even if it's asynchronous, that at least there is a plan, and it's sort of the consistent schedule, and they make a plan. So I think we'll get back towards that, and be all good.
Yeah. We've got some great guests lined up, so I'm excited for some. And speaking of which, we've got a wonderful guest today, our tea drinking compatriot, Nipper. Welcome to the podcast, Nipper. Oh, you got to unmute yourself, though.
I was just saying, it's about bloody time you had me on here, quite frankly. You've been running for years. But it is lovely to be here today.
Yes. Now you've been on. You did our intro at one point. So
I did do an intro when we was in the car.
Yeah, but not in person. We have neglected you, and we apologize profusely. And hopefully we'll make it up to you today.
Okay, we'll go with that. That's good.
It sounds good. Well, yeah, it's good to see you. I guess we get to see you, not the listeners, but they get to hear you. Your wonderful dulcimer tones.
No, that's lovely.
Great voice, but welcome.
Yeah. It feels like we haven't spoken for a long time. Everyone's been away doing herping stuff, which is great. But we've all been at the four corners of the globe.
Yeah, you've had some pretty exciting trips lately as well. And
I've been quite blessed with some trips, which has been good. Finally got the lizard that I needed, which leaves me with one species to see, and then I can concentrate on the American stuff.
Yeah. Now that was a snake or a lizard species that you still need.
I need one. I had two lizards left to complete the list. I went out to Samos, which is a Greek island, but it's actually Asian. It's very weird. It's geographically it's kind of Asian, but it's still owned by Greece. The species is an Asian species, but it still counts on the Euro list. It was super hard to find, but we managed to get it in the end, which is good. And that leaves me just one very large green lacerted lizard to find, which is the Cyclades green lizard. Okay.
What makes that one so difficult?
It's just it's not massive densities, and it's quite hard to get to where it is. It's only on the Cyclades Islands, or Cyclades, depending on how you want to say it.
Yeah.
And even on those islands, it's not in large densities, and it's quite a shy lizard.
Okay. So. Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed. You guys talked about this on Venom Exchange Radio, right?
We did
podcast. Yeah.
Thank you. We did briefly. Yeah, yes, we did. I'm just looking forward to finishing, if I'm perfectly honest.
Yeah, just send your significant other over there. I'm sure she'll find. Oh,
she does way better than I do. I think there's something to be said for having no investment in what you're looking for.
Yeah,
and then it just comes to you. If you're really invested in what you're looking for, I think there's some vibes that you send off, and you may not find it.
Right. Yeah. That desperation, man, it just scares the reptiles away.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is funny though. I think, I was talking to Jordan Parrott, my buddy, he's over in Australia right now, herping with his family. And he's like, man, I think we wouldn't have found half this stuff if it wasn't for my family with me. They're just like, it's funny how
the number of Ali, my partner, doesn't have a reptile list.
Yeah.
But if she did, it would be exceptional, because she's found so many really rare species.
Right.
And she can, it could be the most commonest thing in the world to her. She has no care about it whatsoever.
Yeah. That's fun. Yeah, I've had some fun experiences with my wife herping. I'm telling her, "Oh, we're not going to see a snake. This is just too many people traveling through." And then she comes across a snake. You're like, "Okay, I was wrong. You're the good luck charm."
Right. It was less about that actually being true than trying to persuade her that it wasn't a bad idea to do what you were doing. Right?
Maybe so. Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. Or to reassure her that we were going to get out of there without stepping on a mulga or something. So I think that's what she was more worried about. It's getting dark. We got to get out of here. We're going to step on snakes left and right. Oh, no, you won't see one of those. Oh,
there it is.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, yeah, we're glad you're narrowing your list. You got one more to go, and you'll see all the species in Europe, and that's pretty incredible.
And then there's America.
Yeah. We've got you over here a couple times, right? You've done a few trips, and
I've done a few trips. Yeah. There's a long list. There's obviously the venomous list.
Yeah.
But I was looking at that chap that is trying to find all the reptiles of California.
Isn't that cool? Yeah,
I really like it. Yeah, I love that. And I love the way he flicks through the guidebook and then she goes, right, I'm going to go find this. And the one I saw today was the Californian giant salamander.
Yeah, I saw that one.
And
that was pretty sweet.
I have a weakness for salamanders.
Yes.
I want to see that. So when Rob takes me to see rattlesnakes in California, that's definitely bycatch, 100%.
That would be a pretty exceptional bycatch. I think
it would.
That deserves a focus.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Well, yeah, we're excited for your next trip over here. Are you going to make Carpet Fest? And
I'm pretty much booked up for 2025 now. I've got all my trips planned. So obviously early I'm going to the Canary Islands because there's a few species I still need for the Canary Islands. Although that's not Europe, I still want to see everything on the Canary Islands. So got a few species left there. Then obviously out to Naxos when the weather's right for the lizard I need. And then out to yourselves to do a little bit of PA herping, hopefully see some hellbenders and some timbers and attend Carpet Fest. And then where after that? Hopefully back out to you again to look for some rattlesnakes in warmer climes. Okay. And then Portugal for a newt, and then we'll see after that.
Very cool. Sounds like a really good schedule there.
Yeah. I just need more time and more money.
Right.
Same as everybody.
Yeah. That's the tricky thing, right?
Yeah.
Well, it seems like you get out there quite a bit. You're a very experienced and well-traveled field herper, and it's been great to be with you on some of those trips and to see you in action. I guess
see me in action, see me tired and confused because of the time difference.
That does make it a little more challenging, doesn't it? Yeah, cool. All right, well. As such an experienced and accomplished field herper, we're going to talk about a topic in field herping that I know that you and Rob have debated a bit, and you should be the perfect guest to discuss this. And we're going to talk about either field herping to a list or just kind of going to an area, I guess, and field herping to an area. Would that be a good summary of the topic?
100%. Random herping or specific lists.
Yeah. Alley field herping or nipper field herping, right?
My field herping.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and do the customary coin toss. We'll go ahead between me and Rob to see who gets to debate you. All right. Go ahead and call it, Rob.
Tails.
It is heads. I'm sorry, but as this has been a topic between the two of you, I'm going to go ahead and fill the moderator seat. I think this is kind of a topic that you guys have kind of come up with and worked out a bit. So I think I'm interested to hear what you both have to say. So, all right, well, let's have Nipper call the next one.
I'll go heads again.
It is tails. So, Rob, we got 2 missed calls today. Man, that's
I know.
rarity.
Wow. Well, right. Fair enough.
What side would you like to take, Rob?
Well, I think just for the form of the thing, to give the best content, because step one will be right there's kind of definitionally there's a value or utility to herping to a list, but when we say that, do we mean solely like divining the mission of the trip, or is it kind of giving ideation about where to go generally, right? So you had a great phrase for that, Justin, in terms of sort of, right, it might drive being in a given location, but you just said it this morning, but it doesn't come to mind. Regardless, I will let Nipper play to his preference. I'll try and fight the the offhand here, and we can go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to contrarily go, although it's very hypocritical of me, I'm going to go not herping to a list.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. I see. You know that I know that you know.
Exactly. Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay.
Right. Well, Rob, as the coin toss winner, are you going to lead us out, or are you going to defer to Nipper and chuck him?
I will chuck him, and let's see where this goes. I love this.
Okay.
So many backfooting, so many different ways. Okay. Let's see.
Okay. Well, if you will, I would like you to close your eyes and imagine you are on the south coast of Bulgaria in beautiful wetland habitat at the migratory season. So all the birds are there, the orchids are all out, and all the flowers are in bloom. And you're spending a whole week just walking around herping. And then I would like you to imagine that you drive a few hours, half a day, and then you're in the beautiful Evros Delta, another massive wetland with all the flowers blooming and all the birds are out. And both of these are world sites for wildlife. And you are just a miserable old fuck because you cannot find the species you're looking for. You're seeing hundreds of herps, you're seeing butterflies, you're seeing dragonflies, you're seeing orchids in bloom, and you're walking around with a face like a smacked ass because you cannot find one long brown snake. And that, gentlemen, in a nutshell, is why you shouldn't herp to a list. You should just go and appreciate everything and not be so focused that it stresses you out if you can't find one horrible, annoying snake.
Compelling. I like that. What you got, Rob?
Yeah, so certainly the passion that you're bringing on that is, I certainly understand that and relate to it, even in the smaller sense, right, of saying being in the local area and sort of the pressure of, trying to find eastern diamondbacks. I know we felt that on the trip together, Nipper, and then certainly I felt it even more pressingly when I'd gone specifically for that to a very specific place in a short window of time, and it was getting to the 11th hour of the trip. Yeah, absolutely. I understand that. I think to me, maybe the lists are most effective. Herping to a list is most effective, paradoxically, when you have checked off nothing. Right, that you the entire world or the entire area, whether it be that state, that region, whatever, that's when acting to the list has its greatest benefit, because it actually can cause you to appreciate anything and everything, right? Everything is new, everything is special, everything's a tick, if you want to count it in that way. So that's when it has its greatest utility. It has its least utility for both your experience, your enjoyment of the thing, and embrace of the moment when it is that singular thing, until you tick the singular thing, and then it's pretty okay. So there's 100% utility on the front end for an area that gradually diminishes until it's complete, and that moment of completion, you're probably even exceed where you started from.
I would agree in principle. That's as far as I'm prepared to go. I would agree in principle, and I do. Joking apart, I do get it. When you first start a list, whether it's I'm going to do a backyard list, or I'm going to do a state list, or I'm going to do all the lacertids, or I'm going to do all the rattlesnakes, or whatever you're going to do. When you first start, it's easy enjoyment because you're probably going for the more common species. And you can get, it's like when I come to America, I'm literally like, as I said before, I'm like a child because everything I see is brand new and exciting and shiny. It's lovely. But as you say, as you move on through that list, it becomes harder and harder. And what started out as a jolly wheeze suddenly becomes very, very stressful. I'm looking forward to going with Rob when he's looking for Obscurus. Because I think that in terms of American stuff is probably the most stressful thing to find. And, it's something that you're going to have to chuck money and time at. And our time and our finances are valuable. We all have families and other hobbies and, we work hard and we get a certain amount of time off work. And we want that time to be successful. And if we've driven hundreds and hundreds of miles or flown hundreds and hundreds of miles and we walk around some scrubland and nothing happens, it's going to be very frustrating. But if you didn't have a list and you was just walking around scrubland, you'd be looking at cacti and lizards and mammals and all those things that you just run over in Australia because you're looking for snakes.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something to that. On the other hand, so two thoughts come to mind out of that. The first would be that I think just going to the places associated with a specific list, right? And maybe this is the benefit of what you're consistently preaching of saying areas rather than types of things. So to the extent my, post or COVID-induced list became U.S. Crotalus forms, right? And part of that then becomes, well, what am I even counting or not counting? And there's some personal feelings to that, or feelings, dynamics, however we should frame it. But, it also has caused interactions with all sorts of other things. And so that list has naturally expanded to be U.S. rattlesnakes, so including Cistrurus, U.S. venomous. Dr. J popped us that first coral snake. Then I saw a Florida one, but still need to get a photo. That becomes its own. And then let's try and find all the Pituophis because I've seen the forms in California, Arizona, Utah.
Hold on a minute. When did this list come out? Why am I not on this list?
Well, mostly because you refuse to be included on the heterodon list. So,
don't talk about pieces of shit snakes.
I've had enough of your hog nose bashing.
Yeah, Pituophis are cool.
So, as a part of that, so that's one aspect, right? Is the benefits rather than having a regional list is having a specific list is then you can just expand the list as you're hitting that nadir in your experience using the list, you can then approach it and say, okay, well, let's expand the list. It includes this now, those sorts of things, as opposed to I think it really fundamentally is your Herculean task of saying, let me find all the species in Europe has really prejudiced you against this because there was no way to manipulate the list. You didn't start with, a more narrow list that as your capacity to achieve the list went down, you didn't have the ability to just expand the list, thereby sort of reinvigorating the character of the thing. So to me, within its defined list, you're talking about Obscurus, and I don't doubt that when I'm on the 12th trip, I won't have this enthusiasm. On the first trip, there won't be negativity around not finding it because it's this really cool habitat that I would not otherwise be in, and I don't anticipate on the fact that I'm coming to the party with no expectation of finding it, despite trying to align all the things to give it its greatest chance. I'm not nearly so optimistic that I would actually see one, to the point where if we do, I would just be, I think, certainly I'd be excited. I would just be shocked, right? It'd be like, well, there's dumb luck for you. Okay, cool. I guess I've been saving up to get that. So
To quote Shakespeare, I think she doth protest too much. I think you will have a proper sad on if you can't find it quite early on. I'll be putting my hands up to it straight away. There is we're all guilty of it. I would say probably you and Justin are more guilty of it in Australia than you are in America. But we're all guilty. We all have stuff that we really want to see, and it becomes so addictive. I mean, if anyone's pretending that it's not an addiction and they're happy just to wander around and see stuff, I think they're lying. Everybody has stuff that they really, really want to see. And if you plan to trip around that particular species and you don't see it, I don't care how zen you are. And I know you are proper zen, but you're still going to have a sad on.
I do think you kind of stratify your list in tiers. You know, you have your top tier finds, and as Rob said, you know, if you haven't found a lot of those, then, you know, finding one makes the trip worth it, and you can kind of justify the other two. But also, not finding gives you a reason to go back to the area, whether that's a 12th trip might be pushing it a little bit and might be a little rough unless it's a local thing, you know, traveling thousands of miles to go look for one specific thing on one specific rock might be a little tedious after the,
in total, trips. I had 6 trips for the blotch snake. Wow. And I don't even want to add up how much money that cost to find a small or a medium-sized snake that lives in a pond. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? But which brings me to my.
I do think that's kind of that when you're driven to complete a list, that's probably when it gets to the ultimate tedium. When you're starting a list, as Rob said, it's all great, and even in the middle, I would say it's probably fantastic. I'm sure on the 3rd or 4th trip, you were still enjoying everything, and there's much more to see than that specific target. So. You know,
You've led me almost in a perfect segue to my next point, which is I'm going to use Bulgaria as an example again, purely because that's where my frustrations were at their worst. We was out with a group of chums that I herped with regularly in Europe, and some of them were new. They hadn't been to Bulgaria before. My friend Trev has been with me on all but one of the Bulgaria trips. And I found with a particular location, which is arguably the rarest snake in Europe, which is the reddish whip snake. Very gracile, long, coolabrid snake, like bottle green, but with a bright red head and collar. Really nice looking snake.
Very cool.
And it's super, super rare. I mean, in Europe, its distribution is tiny. Just a little tiny part of Bulgaria and a little tiny part of Romania on the coastal. And we went to this location to look, not for that, but to look for something else. And I flipped a log and there was one underneath. And everybody is losing their mind. And I'm like, meh. It's not the snake I'm looking for. I've seen it before. And to see something so rare, and just because I'd seen it before, that was devalued, that shouldn't happen. That's what's wrong with having a list. And we saw a ton of Amidites vipers, iconic venomous snake, and always different. The patterns on every individual are different. It's just a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I'm literally finding them, and I'm just like, oh, for flip's sake, another Amidites. That's wrong. Every one of those should have been a gift that I just sat down and went, wow, I found a wild Amidites. But because I'm working to a list, that was just time taken up where I wasn't finding what I was trying to find.
Mm-hmm.
So two things here. This leads me to so I have the positivist direction relative to herping to a list, and then perhaps more cynically, I would point out that's just the problem with herping in Europe, because you're just flipping everything, and so it's all about this manual toil of flipping rocks to then find these snakes. And that really, if you just encountered them as you're on walkabout, that's the cynicism associated with this is actually just the manual toil, and you're just like, what if any is the prize under the rock, and then it's the wrong prize.
You're completely right. I mean, I wish we could American herp and just sit in a nice air-conditioned car and just drive up and down and listen to music and chat shit and go, oh, there's a snake. But unfortunately, in Europe, that doesn't happen.
In Australia, too.
Exactly. We have to work for our snakes. Imagine how many snakes you'd find in America if you flip some rocks.
Yeah.
Well, and so certainly we do. I'm just saying that we also find them just,
you do,
out and about doing their thing. And so I think, it makes your accomplishment relative to Europe all that much more impressive, right? Is part of it to me. Even finding stuff on the East Coast here is really impressive to me, or the northern Midwest and things like that, because it's entirely different. I think we all have our love for the desert is not only the environment generally and the creatures, it's that it's a lot more convenient, when views go on forever and there's not a ton of leaf litter, and you can just things will be out. And if you, particularly if you can train your eye for the cryptic features within that environment, or I do admit, right, on our first Utah trip where we were trying to find concolor, and I checked, 1,000, several thousand perfect nooks awaiting a rattlesnake, and did find one appropriately. Well, yeah, or was that blacktail? That was a different trip, right? The blacktail in the nook was a different one. So so I was 1 for 1,500 or something on our first Utah trip. And it was a lutosis, not a concolor, in that different habitat that was, doing better, so meaning the conditions were more favorable to finding a snake in that area relative to what we had seen previously. So
I think too, a big factor that, you don't have any control over, but has much control over reptile activity is the conditions. And when you're booking a trip, months in advance, you have no clue what the conditions are going to be that week. And so I think just a piece of advice for anybody herping is don't get to that point where you're so focused that you can't appreciate other things other than the number one on your list, or the last thing on your list in the case of Nipper. Be able to appreciate, dare I even say the B word, birds, other animals, like you were saying, the orchids, the bird life, the mammals, there's all sorts of things out there that are really exciting. And also, I think we've hit on this quite a bit on our, in past, recordings, but, the fact that you kind of get that, I've seen that. So, it's just another X or just another Y, instead of like appreciating every, reptile you find, because even if you're finding common species, at least you're finding something, you're not getting skunked. And I think that's a reasonable way to look at a trip, is just, hey, I found something, even if it's a bug or a cool bug or a bird, because there are some days that you're getting skunked, you're not seeing anything. So that's kind of the challenge of herp trips for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of the Obscurus, for that trip, Nipper, two advantages, right, are that the at least at this point, again, trip 1 rather than trip 12, is the ability to combine it with other habitats that are very close by, where I still have other things that are on lists. To Justin's point about sort of tiering and things, is I'm not super worried about trip 1, because as part of the broader trip venture, we're going to be days out of seeing, things that are similarly, in certain ways, right? I probably am more interested intrinsically in seeing a Senicolus than I am, I'm like Justin here at this point, than I am in seeing an Obscurus, right? Yeah, old news, wouldn't be old excited. News.
If we see one, we'll just kick it off the trail.
Right. I haven't even seen an Arizona form Gila monster. So that similarly is part of the trip, that I'll be super excited for those in some ways, and maybe this feeds to your point. So then I'll circle back that to give a pro point relative to herping to a list is Obscurus. They're interesting snakes. They're probably just northern Silas I was just talking on Stephen Cush's podcast about this a little bit, right? If you read the history of the species description of Obscurus, it seems like there's a lot of herpetocultural politics around it in the 70s, with maybe someone had access to that population, collected a bunch of them, and then wanted to name it and get it protected to avoid allowing other people to similarly access this resource that person had already sort of made their niche, right? So it's interesting. They certainly are a form that exists in the U.S., so they apply on the list and whatever. But when I say intrinsically, I don't know that other than being rare and being Willardi, which are really cool anyway, a variant of Willardi, that it really would matter a ton to, and just sort of feasibility questions, that it would make a ton of difference to me to see a Silas in Mexico than it is, I have to see this thing here. I'm doing, really the value is the fact that it's hard, not the animal necessarily intrinsically. So, if you said on this trip one, you could see a Senecolus and or a Gila, or you could see Obscurus. If I found Obscurus, that would solely be sort of the avoidance of a negative outcome, right? It's the relief. Oh, that's done. There is an intrinsic excitement, but in that relative paradigm, I think I'm honestly might be more excited to see a Senecolus or a Gila in my deep down, right? Now, because as I say, I think that's really a point for you. To me, the beautiful point of a herping to a list is the ability to say, give ideation about where we should go, right? That was the whole point. Was in October 2020, we started creating, we didn't have a list at that point. It was, people go to West Texas. I've never been to West Texas. Let's go to West Texas, because that's a place in the United States that certainly will be accessible. Definitely don't believe in COVID down there, whichever line you want to take. So we knew that would be super accessible and we could do it, and we wanted to give it a shot. And then after that, right, so we did see it was very hard herping relative to finding stuff. We mostly lizards. Again, being open to different things. We did see one beautiful in the sense that it existed. Certainly when we posted photos, people were not impressed with the Atrax that we turned up, but it was beautiful to us as a sign of achievement. And then that became, I've seen prairie rattlesnakes, having lived in Colorado, and I've seen Atrax now based on that trip. I'm at 2 of some number. I don't even know what that is. Let's try and find U.S. Crotalus forms. And now here we are just over 4 years later, and I'm sitting in 24 or 27 and feel pretty good about seeing 26, 27, right? So really the utility to me is saying it's put me in all these different spots. And then even, family trips and things, it's, hey, let's maybe shift the area an hour this way, and that'll give us a shot that when we go and walk about, we can try and find this thing.
Yeah, I would agree. I still think if you see Obscurus in Mexico, you won't have the same excitement as if you see it in the States.
Oh, absolutely. No, so maybe, as ever, right? So much in my mind that I'm failing to convey properly.
You will not be able to count it on your list, because I will haunt you. So let me bring up another point then. Again, I'm going to ask you to use your imagination. So imagine you leave your house and you drive for 2.5 hours, and then you get on a plane for 4 hours, and then you drive for 6 hours, and then you catch a ferry, which is going to take you a couple of hours, and then you arrive on an island, which is small, but not as small as the islands you need to get to, so you have to hire a fishing boat. So you hire a fishing boat and you go 2 hours out into the sea where you can't see anything all around you except for one sea stack. And then after an hour of circling the sea stack, you finally manage to jump from the boat, cling to the side of the sea stack, scramble up it, and the top of the sea stack is about as big as an American football field. And that is the total world distribution of a certain type of lizard, which is the porry wall lizard, which is on the European list.
Yeah, so the multiple thoughts I have out of that is A, amazing, B, really then, again, we're talking about problems with the particular list you chose to fulfill, which, puts us there, and or taxonomists who decided that, the C stack is, deserves species status.
But, sorry, my point is the amount of effort to see 1 6-inch brown lizard and the finances involved to see 1 6-inch brown lizard. I could have had a lovely, relaxing herp trip to Costa Rica and just wandered around and seen so many beautiful things. I could have herped in England and seen every every English herp in that time, easily, twofold. We only have a few. But if you're going for a list, it increases your logistics and it increases your time and outgoing for a single species.
Yeah, absolutely. But the adventure, what you described, right? That's the adventure. Anyone, whether they're interested in reptiles or not, when you're telling them that story, I'm sure they find it compelling. And I know you have plenty of stories like that, both in and out of reptiles, but nevertheless, right? That's part of the fun of the thing, So, yeah, I think it also speaks to the beauty of my list, which is not all of the X of Y. It's, what creatures do I find compelling? And that drives the list, and then as it gets closer, maybe then it expands to be, again, crotalus forms turned into rattlesnakes, turned into all U.S. venomous based on the trips, based on conversations with you, right? And maybe I accepted too much your ideology on this point, because in reality, my list was crotalus forms, and then Pituophis forms, and then heterodon forms. Not just all the potential animals in this area. It's what are the things that really drive of interest to me. In Australia, it's pythons and goannas principally, and then it's becoming geckos based on the Oedura that we saw. But it probably wouldn't be geckos; it'll be Oedura or Nephurus. And then or Saltuarius. Working through those things, and then maybe it's only as that list gets closer that it might become all the top end geckos, the Saxicolus geckos, or something. It could be more broad, but I don't know that I'll make it unless I move there. I don't know that I'll ever get to that point. It's more likely that I would say from the U.S. going to Australia, there'd be all the Nephurus, and driving to that. And then, as you say, hopefully there are so many lists there between pythons, goannas, and geckos that in reality that gives me a ton of exposure to everything.
All right, firstly, I'm going to pretend that I'm not really excited about all the lists that you've just mentioned, because they generally sound amazing. I'm actually fizzing for them. But from my perspective, contrary to making lists, it's if you keep adding to the list, you're still challenged. If you're going to say you're going to do all the Oedura or you're going to do all the Varanus, you're still limiting yourself to where you are going to go, because by the nature of your list, let's not forget, I'm a fat old man, and you nearly killed me, making me go up and down the Grand Canyon just to see a maybe species of rattlesnake.
Sure,
this is
definitely a form.
It's definitely a form. To be fair, it was absolutely stunning. But this is what your obsession has led to, Rob. This is your fault.
But otherwise, that's sure. But we're all the better for it, right? I'm certainly the better for it.
I think a great story, at least.
It was one of my favorite herping stories. But that's not the point I'm trying to make. My point is, we started that walk down the Grand Canyon, and Justin found a lovely pyro. Stunning. We could have turned back at that point, gone and had some hot chocolate, caramel chai latte, got some burgers, just sat and watched some strange films that you show me when I come over. And instead, we walked all the way to the bottom of the Grand Canyon to see a rattlesnake because it was on your list.
Sure. So I forget if it's alpha or numerical, right? But Justin, you were talking when we were on this, it was the backside of that trip, right? Where we were talking through either whatever it is, type 2 or type B fun, right? And I think, embrace sure, it takes a certain person fortunately, you know, as part of the joy of these trips, really the joy of these trips is interacting with you guys and the experiences that we get to make together associated with that. And it turns out the people that I most enjoy being with generally are people that have an appreciation for that, you know, type B fun. And the list pretty much divines itself as to who we wind up going with, because you know, if people try and do it who really aren't interested in that, you know, they don't ask back, you know, and that's fine. That's totally fine. And even maybe the answer is I need to be a little more permissive of that, because maybe it was in that moment they weren't. Yeah, I see a nipper, but I try to be accepting, and say, like, you know, maybe it was an off day or whatever, and there is that reality, and sometimes maybe I feel too harsh about that, but it really is about the people and the experiences that we get to craft together. So, you know, and the realization that, yeah, we have this shared common experience that is now so rewarding because it was hard, is really amazing.
I almost think that the pyro was that more exciting because, you know, you're so focused, rattlesnake, and then all of a sudden you look over and you see a pyro. You're like, whoa, I didn't even think about that, you know, and you get very excited. And also,
I hadn't thought about it at all.
Right.
To your point, Nipper, there was one snake that was on my mind. It wasn't, oh, there can be nothing else here, but it certainly, you know, especially that form definitionally, right? The northern side of the Grand Canyon, that's the southern terminus of that species or subspecies or what, you know, and now not even taken or whatever, but that's the defined southern terminus of that is where we were. And if I was thinking about it as the area, I probably could have realized that.
And that, I think that makes it all the more, you know, exciting. I guess it can go either way, right? You can be like, oh, well, that's not my target, so I'll take a couple pictures and move on my way to find my target. Or you can be overjoyed that you weren't even thinking about that as an option, and it presented itself, you know. So I guess it's a lot of this is in, you know, the eye of the beholder, or however you're gonna, I like the Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance, you know, that aspect of it where you're, you know, the journey is part of the reward and not just the destination. So you've got to be able to enjoy as you're going, whatever you happen to find. And I think as long as you can be a little Zen about it, you're going to have a good trip regardless. I never saw myself herping Pennsylvania. Like, I never thought of Pennsylvania as a cool place to herp, but hanging out, you know, in the Poconos and seeing all those water snakes and, you know, the snakes in the crack and stuff. I thought that was a cool experience that I never would have had because I wouldn't have thought of going to Pennsylvania to herp. So, you know, that was kind of one of those moments that you didn't know were waiting for you. I think South Australia was kind of similar, where I went for a specific, you know, had my top tier not pan out at all. But all of the other things that we saw were fantastic. The scenery, I mean, just the scenery was kind of worth the trip in a lot of ways. So, and gives me a reason to go back and enjoy that again, because it was hard herping. And I think if we would have found all the top targets, you know, maybe I wouldn't have gone back, you know, to some extent. But I think, you know, it gives me another reason to try again and to experience that landscape again.
Well, and what you speak to there, Justin, it does, you know, remind me, it is an important point to highlight that finding something definitely changes the experience, right? So the places that I've found, when there are additional difficulties, be it physical, right? So say our Grand Canyon experience hadn't been, we didn't have the crack team that we did, and we don't turn it up. Yeah, that's probably a pretty rough day out, you know. So it is the beauty in finding the thing, you know, and my own, absolutely, you know, and my experience, you know, in the Pine Barrens would kind of speak to that. Pine Barrens, and even some of our Florida experience, it has been that, like, in those habitats where densities are so low, and it's sort of everything is special just because everything is a challenge, right? That's kind of the Florida thing. Also driving those sand roads that are, you know, the pile will feel it and all. And, certainly the Pine Barrens. I mean, there's the places that we're going, you're going to be scratching for 3 weeks, regardless of what you do coming out of that thing. So, that, and probably to have seen nothing, on this trip, I forget what, at this point, it's been long enough that I've forgotten the indignity of the thing, but it was something that over a 2-day window, Eric and I had walked 15 or 16 miles to see one snake. It was hands over your ears, mittens here, but an eastern hog, my life for eastern hognose snake, one snake for 16 miles, though, not excluding things, right? So that would be a list item. It wasn't the top priority. It would probably be priority number 2 or 3 for that area. And especially being new to me, that was fantastic, but that's really, really tough, really draining. And especially on that one, that was probably 5 or 6 miles into the thing. And then you got 10 miles more over the next day and a half, day and a few hours to see genuinely nothing, or at least genuinely nothing if your list is defined to snakes and non, sort of scalaparous type lizards or whatever, of which, okay, we got a couple individuals of one species. That's pretty rough. And that maybe makes, the area a little less welcoming as opposed to, southeast Arizona and stuff. And a lot of your rock hopping and things sound like they fall more into that category. So I understand then, and are much more difficult logistically to do and expensive in the first place, right? So it's not only the experience that I'm describing there, it's also the constraints that are associated with it. I understand how things could look a little grim.
Indeed. So I understand. I agree with what you're saying. I'm going to try and turn that around a little bit. Where do you live, Rob? Colorado. You have got some awesome species in Colorado.
Absolutely.
People would travel miles and miles to watch some of the stuff that you have in Colorado. And you don't. You bugger off to loads of different places to see pythons and mollusks and irregulars and all that sort of stuff. You could just be wandering around in your backyard having a lovely time and really getting to know your local species. But because you've got a list, they are nothing to you. They are like a cup of cold sick that you drop as soon as possible. Once you've seen it in your backyard, you're not interested. You want to go and see the sexy, exotic stuff on a different continent to tick your list. Or if it's not got a buzztail, you're not interested because it's not on your list. You're not appreciating your local wildlife, Rob. And that's all to do with you having a list.
Well, I think this is where we need to work on our Zen, because I would dispute that. I would say, so the most common snake in Colorado, for sure, both in terms of actual abundance and rate of encounter, is the western terrestrial garter snake, which to me is perpetually one of my favorite snakes. I love seeing them. And you guys can attest to it in the group chat. How many photos of me, oh, check out this one. No, it's cool. It's got this one white scale on its belly, or whatever. And you guys are like, seriously? And you've actually, well, certainly I know, Justin, you see them quite a bit, because it's probably, at least within your part of the state, equally true there.
Yeah.
And Nipper, you've seen them as well. When I've said, hey, let's go to my favorite spot in Colorado, we did see one there. So, it's a nondescript, but, between 4 inches, something like that, as a baby, and a big female might be a couple feet long, but yeah, they're still one of my absolute favorite snakes. And when we go to take my daughter to the ice arena and things, I invariably will go flip. There are a couple boards there, and every time I go flip those boards to see if they're there.
I will say too, same thing. They're very common around here. I love to see them. I don't love to handle them because they stink. But I found this huge female, gravid female, sitting on the side of a trail, sunning, in the early summer. And if it was like, it's just a garter snake. No, I stopped and looked at it, and I actually was taking some video. And it did this weird tongue flick thing where it was circling its tongue around in a kind of a broad arc and circle. And I thought, I have never seen that before. That's a weird new behavior that I didn't know existed. And if I wouldn't have spent the time to look at that garter snake and mess with it a little bit and take some pictures, I wouldn't have seen it. So, I think there is some, of course, we get that, oh, it's just my local garter snake attitude. It's hard to not get that at times. And frankly, if we weren't working on a field guide, I probably wouldn't have spent so much time in actuality. But, it was a cool, very, very large female, probably the biggest garter snake I've ever seen. And so that kind of added a little bit of excitement to it. But, I think we don't want to get too burnt out on our locals. And I think, if you can maintain that excitement and joy in the common species, you're going to be a happy herper no matter where you are.
Indeed. So I'm going to get you to use your imagination again. Your imagination is going to be well worn out by the end of this. Imagine you are about 7,500, 8,000 feet up in the air in the mountains of Montenegro, which borders Greece and Macedonia for the geography challenged people in America. And you have on your list a species which is found there, or subspecies, but very striking subspecies, Vipera bosniensis, lovely barred venomous snake. And there's a few of you there, and some of them say, oh, I'm not really that bothered about seeing that. We're going to go and have a look over in this habitat that we've not herped before. Or do you want to stay in the habitat where your species for your list is? And I stayed to look because I'm dedicated to the list. And I didn't find it. They had a fabulous time, and they found amelanistic newts. They found beautifully coloured Viper amidites. And a leopard snake, which is one of the most photogenic European snakes. I'd seen it, but it's always good to get photographs. So I just wandered around on the side of a mountain looking in thorn bushes, and I missed out purely because I was stuck to a list.
Why were you there?
Why was I there? To find
the purpose of the trip was to find that thing, and your companions just decided based on what the condition so it was exposure to the other site, the unplanned site or whatever, and saying let's check this out because that's a prioritization. I mean that sounds like that's really painful, and is really associated with okay, what was it's almost, again, getting back to the idea of the experience with the group of saying, why is it that I'm here with this group at this time, the pre-plan, all those things. That's incredibly difficult, right? Because that really, at that moment, was about, well, am I going to stick to the list or am I going to go with my companions and do this or whatever? That's not to say that there aren't times within a trip where people will split off and things, but that sounds pretty fundamental. And it's, if everyone else on the trip is actually I, could take or leave finding that particular thing. Maybe in that moment, as you're alluding to, based on how it played out, right? All of this is post facto, but I would say that the approach I would have in that moment is probably, and would like to say that I would take is, okay, I need to come back here by myself because the rest of the group doesn't have that same passion. As much as we're framing it as saying, I wanted to go to the bottom to find the Grand Canyon rattlesnake, everyone on the trip wanted to find the Grand Canyon rattlesnake. There was no other place they'd rather be,
Yeah, I'd like to lie and say that wasn't the case, but we was all absolutely choking to find that snake.
I mean, we did question the sanity a little bit.
Obviously,
sure.
We knew
absolutely.
The tall order that it was, but we were on board. Yeah. And
I mean, as a credit to both of you and Dustin as well, I would say that you successfully, my respect for you guys and your ability to assess and effectuate a task made your questions about that sanity more apparent to me. Yeah, or maybe consider it. Didn't make me change my mind, but nevertheless did make me assess it again, and was disconcerting. It wasn't the full-throated support I was hoping for sure.
And why didn't you change your mind, Rob? Because you were fixating on the list. You're obsessed. It's become an addiction.
It's because that's why we were there. I mean, that's the thing, and that's what So yes, applying it right to the Montenegrin situation, right? I would then say, like, wait, I thought this was the ideation of the trip. The reason we are here is this, not just to herp the area, right? And that's where it then would become, okay, I need to assess where we're at on this trip. Fundamentally, the point of this venture, all of this is a fancy way, well, with a couple other sidebars, but realistically, hey, this is the opportunity to do this thing. This is the thing that we're doing. I thought we were aligned on that, and if there's a misalignment, okay, lesson learned, and we probably all need to reassess, and that doesn't mean, we can't do anything, or whatever, but it's like, we won't be, I will put on the list, let's go to the Grand Canyon and try and do this, which would be a real shame, because it was you folks being there that made it seem possible to me, which again then put us in a context where you're having doubts about the sanity and veracity of the thing, made me was all the more disconcerting.
Yeah. To be fair, no fun story starts with a health and safety briefing, does it? So.
That one might have. Yeah.
But I appreciate the point, nevertheless. I certainly do. And that is a huge bummer. I mean, that being said, right, so say that situation plays out just so slightly differently. I mean, the result is entirely different, but say you then found what you were seeking, and they had that same experience. So that the only thing that changes is that you happen to see one. Then what's that story? They probably, then it's just the perfect mixed bag, right? And that's sort of our Utah first trip. Justin had family obligations, had to come a day later. Misses literally that same, form of pyro. This is a mating pair of pyros on the trail, right? Yeah. So, but because of, and I'm sure if then that, as it was leading into, if we then spent, a bunch of time looking for other things and failed, as we did, and didn't have the spectacular end that we did, Justin's probably having some serious questions about that deal. But, those later successes and all these different things come through. And then, it gets, the additive experience of the Grand Canyon Forum. He'd already gone on different. Okay, I need to knock this out by myself. Then this is no longer a common goal. This is now a goal I need to effectuate by myself. And then when we're back in that habitat, we don't see him the same spot that he had found them previously. So, yeah, I don't know. That just sounds like a bummer that the snake wasn't sitting out that day.
Yeah, it's what it is.
More than anything.
I've seen it now. It's fine. It's absolutely fine. just to illustrate a point.
I do think there's a point here too. Is sometimes you have to choose one thing over another, and if that's I'm going to choose the list over herping with my buddies, then that's the choice you make, and you got to live with the choice. Or you're saying, no, I'm gonna skip my list for now. I'm gonna put that off till another day. And like Rob said, maybe that's a solo venture rather than a group venture if not everybody's on board. Sometimes you have the conceptualization of something, and when you're actually going to carry it out, it seems, oh wait, this is a little more daunting than I thought. For example, when I was in Australia on my own, there was that road leading to the Lost City where you have a good chance of seeing Glebopalma, but it had rained and the road was pretty crappy, and I was by myself, and I was thinking, yeah, it's not worth the risk. I'm not going to drive out here because I probably won't see one either, but I'm going to make the choice to go somewhere else and see something that I've already seen, but have a better experience potentially in the long run, and not have the stress of trying to dig myself out on my own. So that's the choices we make, I suppose. But yeah.
Nevertheless, I really do, both relative to the list and sort of that experience that you're mentioning there, Nipper. I do I can't lie that I am super jealous of Keith and him having seen the same Glebopalma, presumably twice. And we were literally, this wasn't a question of having made a different choice. It was just exploring different areas. And man, it really speaks to how secretive and cryptic they are. That his experience over 2 instances was probably a combined 10 or 15 seconds, and that was it. I spent hours, staring at the wall, fixed on it with a camera, looking into the viewfinder, and missing the native experience that Justin got, native European anyway, experience that Justin got in that same place.
I don't think you missed out much.
But yeah, I mean that's half the joy of the thing. If it's called fishing, not catching. It's called herping, not finding. And it would be less. I think we would care less if it was easier.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I find this exceptionally difficult because, if I'm honest, I can't imagine herping without a list. It's a total anathema to me. Anyone that herps without a list is a much better person than me, that they are that chilled, because I literally, it doesn't matter where I am, I love to be mission focused on a list, and the sense of achievement I get when I find that species. And I know both of you organize your own trips and do the same thing. When you sat for hours looking at photographs and trip reports and scientific papers, and you narrow down where you think that species will be, and then you go there and then you find it, there is nothing like it. And that is why it's so addictive. Yes, it's nice to want, I'm out arguing myself now, I appreciate that. But it's lovely just to walk around in nature and see lizards and frogs and toads and everything. But it's not, whilst there is an excitement and an inverted commas, a high from doing that and finding something, to actually track down a specific species, which, the chances are so minute. You've got to be in the right place at the right time with the right weather. If you took all the different factors to finding that one species and then you actually find it, it's just incredible. And that's what makes it so addictive. Yeah. But I need the structure of a list. That's just my personal. I need the structure. I need a mission focus. Right. I want to find all of it. I don't care what it is, because I know Rob. Florida was not his favourite trip. I loved the Florida trip. I really did. And I know it wasn't your thing. And even though it pissed down with rain for so long, so then suddenly realised that we'd seen the majority of the Florida toads, and it was just a matter of finding 3 more. Suddenly it galvanised Phil and I so much. That was
new list,
yeah. That was brilliant. I loved the Florida trip. It was really good fun. I mean, sad about the snake and everything, but it was such a good trip in terms of the excitement, even though the weather conditions weren't optimal, and even though we were tired and wet for a lot of the time, and there were strange people, it was still a really good trip because we just smashed that small list. And your list doesn't have to be a massive thing. It could just be like Eric's doing. I want to see all the snakes in my state, which for some may be a relative. If you live in Arizona, it's probably a harder task than if you live in. I'm going to pull a state out that I think is quite small, New Jersey. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, there's more diversity there. I would have said something like Maine.
Montana.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Forgive me. I mean, to be fair, I think I could probably name about 5 states, so I was doing well. But, or you could say, I want to see, as Rob is doing, all of the venomous reptiles of North America, a bigger list. Or you could say, I want to see every lizard, or the best list for America has got to be, I want to see every gecko in America. Because that's an easy tick. What have you got? 5 species, 6, maybe 6. but yeah, just for me, I find it generally addictive. The rush you get for flipping that 400th rock of the day and then seeing the thing that you've traveled hundreds or thousands of miles for, it's unbelievable.
Now, I want you to close your eyes, Nipper, and use your imagination. Mm-hmm. So you've just ticked off the last species on the list. You found all the reptiles in Europe. Yeah. And now you just get to go somewhere in Europe and herp for fun. You don't have a list. You just want to go enjoy all the nature, all the surroundings, and herp as well. Where are you going? What you looking for? You know,
to be perfectly honest, I've got a sub list. So once I finish the European list, it's mainly salamanders.
Okay.
There's a few high altitude salamander species which I've seen technically because I've seen the nominate forms, but localities is a better word. There's some localities that look much better than others. If that makes sense.
Oh, there's some beautiful salamander over there. I'd love to see some of those.
So I've seen all but one of the fire salamander subspecies in Europe.
Yeah,
but that's still one to go for. And I want to go. I mean, some of our vipers, particularly Vipera suwani, the locality difference in colours is incredible. It's a bit like some of the rattles, or like the rosy boas, or even down to.
Oh, you're muted.
How that happened. So some of the montane rattlesnakes, like Stephen's eye, depending on the rocks, or Klauberei, depending on the rocks, the variations will be different. And there's certain species in Europe that are like that, which I'd like to catch up on. I've seen, do you know Cyprus, the island of Cyprus? Mm-hmm. So Cyprus doesn't actually count as Europe.
Oh.
A massive island. Doesn't count. It's not on the European list, but it's got phenomenal herps. It's got about 30 species of herps on it. And I've only got one of those left to see, so that's something else. And then we've got the Canary Islands, which is an island chain. It's off of Africa, but it's owned by Spain.
Yeah.
And each island has got an endemic lacertid, an endemic gecko, and an endemic skink. So it's literally, and it's great because you can take your other half with you and they can just sunbathe. And then you've only got 3 things to find. It's not like you're doing an epic trip. So there's a lot of Europe, what I would call air quotes, European options for me left.
Now you're so list focused that instead of answering the question, you went on what list you're going to go on next. Instead of what relaxing, beautiful place do you want to herp that you've herped before and you've seen everything there?
Oh, okay.
Where are you going back?
Relaxing just sounds like weakness to me. There's lots to be done. No, I will do Spain. I will do a lot of trips to Spain. Spain if you like vipers, Spain is like the epicenter for vipers.
Yeah.
And, Suwani and the Tast has just been revised. So there's a brand new subspecies that I haven't seen yet. So Spain is lovely. The food's great. The scenery is incredible. It's, if you imagine, it's a bit like Arizona with bigger mountains and slightly greener, but not much greener. So, it's just a beautiful place. But my focus will probably be, after that, the US, I would think.
Okay.
Oh, and I'm really, really keen to get out to Japan.
Yeah. I think, there is kind of a little bit of overlap, where you love an area, like Rob was talking about earlier with the desert. You love the desert. It doesn't matter what desert you're in necessarily, and it only sweetens the deal. I mean, that was kind of the draw for Central Australia for me, is desert, but with red pythons. Well, maybe not red in your opinion, but red
brown pythons,
brownish brick pythons out in the middle of the desert. Just filled my wildest dreams, because I love the desert, I love the deserts of southwestern, and I will keep going back to the deserts of southwestern Utah, regardless of what herps I see or what the focus of the trip is. But that kind of that love of something, and not just necessarily a reptile species or a target, but just to get back to somewhere. I think that's important to have that go-to or that piece of being in a desert, regardless of what you're seeing or where you're at, what continent you're on. That's
completely agree. I mean, I will always continue to go to the Greek islands because you've got beautiful mountains, you've got crystal blue sea, phenomenal birds, great food, and you can do a bit of herping at the same time. So why wouldn't you?
Yeah, exactly. Good stuff. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Rob. If you were saying, or Nipper, either one. All right. Well, and we need to be respectful of Nipper's time. He's all dressed up for our podcast, but I think he's got somewhere else to go as well. So, how much longer do you have, Nipper? Are you?
You're muted
again.
Yeah, I'm good for about 20 minutes.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. Any other topics you guys haven't hit on yet? Any other aspects of list herping or?
I genuinely found that really difficult because there's so many points that I wanted Rob to raise about how good it is to have a list.
Yeah.
For me, one of the, playing devil's advocate, for me, one of the best thing about having a list is I've been to so many places that I wouldn't visit unless I was going there for a specific reptile or amphibian. A lot of the places in Europe, you wouldn't necessarily go there for a holiday. Mm-hmm. Like Albania, apologies if any Albanians are listening to him, but it's not the most picturesque or safest place to go. And I wouldn't have chosen to go. I went there. It was fabulous. Really enjoyed it. A lovely country, but it's not somewhere that is at the forefront of, where you think of to go to holiday. Mm-hmm. Some of the, trying to think of some of the other species that have taken me weird places. One of the rock lizards, I drove to a very obscure mountain range in the middle of Spain, miles from anywhere that is touristic at all. It's Penny de Franca Mountains, if you want to Google it. Not a massive mountain chain, and literally in the middle of nowhere. And I sat there for 3 days with binoculars, just looking for a little brown lizard to come out, which, you'd never visit places like that unless you had a specific list. One of the other European lacertids, they're just on sea stacks off the coast of Italy. So you have to get not the Pori wall lizard, but a different one. You have to get a hydrofoil to somewhere like Stromboli. And that Stromboli is beautiful. It's a little Italian island built, obviously we know about the volcano and all that sort of stuff. And, thousands of people were on the island with us all walking around. And it's all typical whitewash walls and very quaint and beautiful flowers growing up the walls and old ladies selling you honey and all that sort of touristic stuff. And everybody's there just for that. And then my chums and I, we're walking around going, look at that lizard. This is the only place you find it. No one else gave a shit. Yeah. But I wouldn't have gone there probably unless I was looking for that particular lizard. And I mean, little some of the Greek islands like Castellarizo. Mm-hmm. Castellarizo, the population of Castellarizo, I think is under 3,000. And you go there, it's got one ferry in every X amount of days. It has one flight in a week, and one flight in, and then you have to wait a week and get a flight out. Yeah. And it's got a salamander that only lives on that island. And it's tiny. It's incredible. But I'd never have gone to Castellarizo or Carpathos. I'd never have gone to Carpathos if I wasn't doing the list. Yeah. That's for me, that's part of the joy, that if you've got like Rob doing the buzztail list, I doubt there's areas on that list that you would choose to herp if you was just thinking of doing I want to go and look for snakes type trip, because some of them, there's not that many species in those areas. You're going specifically for that snake. But when you get there, I mean, for me, New Mexico I thought was stunning.
Mm-hmm.
But it was never on my radar to go to New Mexico. It's not, a touristic place particularly. I mean, Utah is obviously a very touristic place. It's famous for its scenery.
Yeah.
And even Nevada, because you've got Vegas, is a touristic place.
Mm-hmm.
Colorado's, a very famous holiday place. But when you start going out towards Arizona and New Mexico, but it's still, I mean, the sunsets and the cacti and all, it's just stunning. It's just amazing.
Yeah, Sky Islands. Sky Islands are one of the most beautiful places on Earth, and I guess I had such a desert-centered focus that I didn't consider montane species, and so I'd never really thought of going to Arizona look for little rattlesnakes up in the mountains, and so that's been a really nice discovery for me, being part of included on Rob's list of buzztails and seeing some of those and seeing the twin spots and Willardi are probably my favorite rattlesnakes now. They're just so cool. And
you had to bring the twin spot up, didn't you? I knew you was going to do it. You had to bring it up. Yeah.
But I didn't think I'd appreciate those as much as I do, and also appreciating my own state as well. I think that COVID lockdown has kind of really helped in that regard too. Is I appreciate what's in my backyard a lot more, and have that drive to go see everything in my state as well. So
I mean, to be fair, out of all of us, I'd say you are without doubt the most fortunate in terms of herping where you actually live.
Yeah.
I mean, the species are so iconic that you have in Utah.
Yeah.
And the scenery is incredible, absolutely incredible.
It's a win-win all around.
It really is. I literally, we have somewhere in the region of natural species. In the UK, we have around 12 species. Mm-hmm. That's it. You've probably got more than that in your backyard. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I look at my area as kind of the small diversity area because we're up in the north, but there is quite some nice species up here as well. Yeah.
Yeah. The only thing against Utah is you've only got one salamander species.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's easy to make the list.
You've seen all the salamanders. Yeah.
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 Yeah, totally. No, I think you've hit on it. To me, that fundamentally is the point, right? And that was why we followed you to the extent that we did, right? Or, I did, in terms of saying, okay, well, what's the thing? Well, I've done 2 of 27. Let's turn this into a thing to ideate. Where do we go? What do we want to do next? And actually, the next thing we did is we went back to West Texas, in the conditions that were supposed to be more favorable, and they certainly were, but it still wasn't good enough, depending on what we were looking for or whatever. But so I had to have a V3 that just happened. But that was the whole thing, is having ideation to go to these places. I would say that the funny part to me is, given my own predilections, my aversion would be to go to the tourist places, where I would, my natural inclination would be to go someplace off the beaten path. Absent trying to find abysses, the Grand Canyon holds essentially no appeal to me, and I realize that's not the case, I have no to climb to the bottom of the Grand Canyon. Zero.
Well, I'll disagree with you there because
sure. Again, that's my own, but that's my own.
I still feel, snake or no, in terms of the physicality and in terms of the scenery, I thought that was awesome.
Yeah,
the physicality for sure, and the scenery to some extent. I just we all have our own taste, right? And saying like, okay, where is it that we would want to go? What would be on our list or not on our list? I know the Grand Canyon is a life's goal for a lot of people. I'm the weird one. I don't dispute that.
Reminiscing about that trip, and I think it will illustrate a point. For me, obviously, the finding the snakes was incredible. But for me, one of the most enjoyable memories for that trip, which was an absolute gift, was the fact that I got to sit in the dirt with a friend and just dig for fossils. And for both of us, we were giggling like children at the fact that we could actually just sit there and there was, million-year-old fossils everywhere. Yeah. That was insane. And that wouldn't have happened if we wasn't doing the list. because that's not
absolutely.
somewhere we'd have been anywhere near if we wasn't targeting a specific snake. It's quite off the beaten track.
Or it wouldn't have happened without the specific person that you're talking to, without having Dustin on the trip. That wouldn't have been the case, because I appreciated him. I got excited, but I wasn't going to sit in the dirt.
Sit in 110 degrees.
I'll look at him and say, "Oh, cool," and then I'll say, "I'm going to continue on looking for reptiles now." But I did appreciate the Native American aspect, the ruins there. That was really cool. I love that kind of stuff as well as Rob and you and the rest of the group. But I think my focus on the reptiles was kind of took me away from the dirt digging.
I mean, well, and that's just goes to show personal taste, right? So that place is one of my favorite places ever, and I knew of that place, and to me that place, given my own taste, is far more compelling than the Grand Canyon. Absent the snake, that place to me is much more special. And so that's, again, just to each their own. But the list allows you to really, it's sort of the interesting thing, right? There's a lot of conversation around, should you try to keep different things, and this person, they just switch from one thing to the next or whatever, and all those things within herpetoculture. And the answer is, well, if you haven't tried it, how would you even know? Right? How would you know how you react? How would you know your taste, what your flavor is? So there's some aspect of that as well.
I'm curious, Rob, did you know about the fossil aspect of that site, or had you ever noticed?
Yeah, I was, I did. I knew of it, but I find it compelling, right, in the context of anything, right, of saying, I probably find it a little less compelling than both more and less than I should, that it's just amazing to me that, there are these million-year-old fossils, but it's one of those things that, like, yes, intrinsically I've an understanding of that in the scale of time, but I also don't, right? That's beyond my capacity to comprehend, right? What that actually is and looks like. And so it's not something that to me holds. The interesting thing to me about that is the site. It's not, it's because we're Americans, Snipper, not, our sense and context of history, right? It's
300 years old.
That, even, when I'm in Ghent, right, and there's the 1,000-year-old monasteries or whatever, they're just intermixed, they're still being actively used in things. Our context is so dramatically different from that just the idea of, okay, well, that similarly aged thing is, sort of what we're talking about here, but it looks obviously it presents entirely differently at this point. So that to me is the part that is motivating and driving. Yeah, I knew that was there, but that's not a driver for me. But it turned out to, facilitate this profound experience for you guys, so it is amazing. But again, to Justin's point, that wasn't even where we were going. We were trying to go to a different place that was closed because they've limited access, save for days of the week that wasn't or whatever. And then it was like, well, I know this place that I really enjoy for my own purposes, that's close an hour this other direction or whatever. So at least we can do that, and then we can see. And it turned out just by chance to be this really compelling thing for you guys.
I just feel sorry for you, Rob, because I have no idea how you're going to top that Grand Canyon experience and the fossils on the next trip. I'm expecting, I don't know, Scandinavian volleyball team to turn up or something like that.
Well, you should have been in Australia with us. Oh boy. All right. Well, I think we've done it. That's some great points and some great discussion. And I knew it was going to be the case having Nipper on. So thanks so much for coming on, and really appreciate you. Any information you want to put out there about where people can find you and see your adventures and stuff?
If anybody wants to get in touch, please get in touch through Instagram. I do have a Facebook account, but I very rarely check it, so please don't think I'm being rude if I don't reply to you on Facebook. But if you send me a message on Instagram, I will reply as soon as possible.
Is it Nipper Reed on Instagram?
Nipper Reed at Instagram,
Okay. Yeah, cool. And
you have a podcast?
Yeah.
Don't forget to listen to Venom Exchange Radio. We've got a crossover episode coming out with the Nature for You Hypers. Okay. We did a Christmas episode for them on their Australian podcast, and then they're giving us the feed, and we're going to put it out on Venom Exchange Radio. So that should be out in the next few days.
Nice.
But yeah, follow me on Instagram. Will be lovely. Get me over 1,000 followers. Be nice.
All right. Cool. Well, I mean, if whenever you need to run, go ahead and run. I think we're going to keep chatting a bit, but if you need to leave, or feel free to stay and join.
I'll stay for a little bit, but I might, if I just disappear from screen, you'll know that I've gone boxing.
But it's definitely lovely to have you on here, and we really appreciate your time.
My pleasure, and I cannot wait to see you both in person as soon as possible.
Yes, yeah, I'm excited for that.
Yeah.
I'm excited for it to get warmer too, so we'll be herping somewhere.
100%.
That's going to be great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we kind of go through and see if there's any compelling or interesting things you've seen in the week as far as herp related media or whatever in regards to reptile findings or interesting things. Any cool things you've seen this last couple weeks?
Right. Yeah, I was trying to think. I think, again, I'm still kind of in that same space of I'm so intrigued by all the different success, particularly this is happening mostly where we are not, right, in terms of Southeast Asia and Australia. Those seem to really be heating up, and they both video and, the Australians are starting to put out some crazy content. So,
right.
I don't know that I have one specific one to hand to single out, but it does seem like there's been more, people have been having more success on the black soil plains, certainly in the last couple of years. I'm still seeing some of that stuff in terms of Spencer's monitors and the elapids and things that are really difficult. Yeah, exactly. And that, I guess a question that I have, and doubtless sectors, but my question is is it, since it's such difficult habitat, both logistically to get to and low abundance and things, that I do wonder, is the greater success we're seeing a product of particular conditions that are happening right now, like this year, last year, or is there to some extent, is it a reflection of the fact that people are seeing other people have success, so they're putting in the effort to go do it rather than viewing it as something that's not possible, right? That's just always sort of a question, and it certainly is in this context. Is it like, is there something different that's happening now, or is this good year, bad year, or good couple of years compared to a decade of bad, or is it because people have had success, other people are viewing it as worth the trouble?
I think obviously, there's a lot that goes into it, and that makes that speculation and wonderment all the better. But I do think, they have had a lot more rain out there. I remember at least last year seeing a lot of that, and where we've seen, kind of the lasting effects of a good year in an area like that, could go for several years. But obviously last year with a lot of rain, and then this year with people finding cool stuff in good shape, maybe those are tied together. But yeah, very, very cool to see people finding those species. And I think I'll wait, of course, to talk about this, but we're going to have Jordan Parrott on here, hopefully in a few weeks after he gets back from his trip, but kind of some related topics in that regard and what he's finding out there. But I do, we kind of hit on this a little bit in the context of, planning a trip and several months before you go, especially if you're going overseas or something, and trying to plan it so you have good conditions. Never really guarantees you're going to have good conditions, but sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't. But thinking, I thought about this topic a lot with Owen Pelly's, because the year you guys found one seemed like everybody was finding an Owen Pelly. It was like that was the year to find an Owen Pelly. And in hindsight, if I would have understood that, I might have booked a ticket and gone out there and looked again, just to try to capitalize on a good year for Owen Pelly's. And I think that was borne out by some of the searches that Dr. Gavin Bedford was doing, when he was looking to build up his group of Owen Pellies and struggling to find anything, and all his friends and people who were out there looking as well had very little success for a few years, but then all of a sudden they find one, and then another one, and another one, all in the same year. They just kind of start popping out. Now, is that because they got better at finding or better at looking? I don't know. I think it might have been more the conditions or were right, and things developed that way. So it's hard to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And obviously some of it's an access question too, as we saw.
Yeah, for sure.
That our own experience of it in 19 wasn't exactly replicable. Although I think, I don't know, the interesting part to me, I think, and in the same vein of what we discussed earlier with Nipper, was saying, I do think now we've learned lessons that we can take and apply. So not only is it not checked off, so we need to go back.
Yeah.
There's an advantage to doing that again in the context of saying, okay, so the situation was pretty different 5 years on. And to the point where saying I definitely felt like I knew much more than I did the first time. But now I still need to go again to take kind of the updated information and say, okay, now what's practical and possible that I couldn't learn from afar, right? Yeah. And some of that was our experience of it. Some of it was talking to different people. Some is sort of a mixture of both. We found a lot of interesting color that we couldn't understand or know from afar. And, didn't even know to ask, right? That became an interesting pivot point throughout the trip. Was kind of, oh, well, you didn't ask. It's like, well, I didn't know to ask. So you almost have to go several times to be able to ask. You have to experience it and then talk to people to really be able to do it again, effectuating that information. Yeah,
for sure. And I feel the same way. Like, I think maybe that first trip to Darwin kind of soured me a little bit, not necessarily the herping aspect of it, but the other underlying conditions that were going on at the time with the book and things like that. So this last trip was fantastic. And I had some frustrations because, the best laid plans, can often be, and also things that you don't consider, like, is the area that you're going to on fire currently, and so that plays into it as well. And having a good backup plan, that was made very clear and abundantly clear on this last trip. But I do. Now I'm more excited to get back there and, especially knowing what we know now, having done the second trip and, building on past experiences is really and just the difference, what I anticipated, especially in regards to like simple things like seeing geckos. We saw very few geckos on the road. The Strophaurus is what I'm thinking of, but we also saw some rare and unexpected geckos. I know that Marmorata, I was not thinking we were going to find one in Kakadu, and most people probably, wouldn't. I didn't realize that was even an option. I knew they were, in other areas that I was going to be looking, so I didn't even have them pegged in Kakadu. But then having you guys find that one and seeing that, and then hearing retrospectively that those are a little hard to find or a little more rare in that area was pretty cool. And, so, it's hard to plan for certain things, and some things it's like, well, if you go to this area, that's where they are, and you'll have the best chance of finding them. And others, it's a little more difficult. Planning a trip to find, a blue tongue skink is a little different than planning a trip to find an endemic, gecko that only appears in this habitat or something. So that goes into it for sure. But it is. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, in that same vein, it's sort of, in some ways, I'm envious, right, of your top end Python list, because, well, you're missing. It's sort of an obscure situation, right? Yeah, you're missing the hard one. Simultaneously, yours is very defined, in the sense of the rest of us. We're missing one. It seems to me, and maybe the answer is just go to Catherine and below and whatever. But the answer is at least within that area, the answer becomes they could be anywhere, but they're probably nowhere. That it's which is difficult, right? It's not. It doesn't have that. It's not intrinsically tied to one thing, and so it's fair that the real answer is okay. If that's really the goal, you need to expand. The place that we were trying to look, that circumstances turned against us, is just probably, in terms of reliably finding them, is the far northern end. And if that really is your goal, then you need to go further. And so I guess, relative to herping to the list, the question, because I would say that the trip was not, it was a Kakadu trip rather than a trip to tick off that python that the rest of the group was missing, right? You'd already seen it, whatever. But, the trip, despite hoping to see it and maybe ideating going back there based on, hey, let's try and do this one or whatever. In reality, it was more about a trip to fill your list than it was to fill ours, because we weren't going to the places, or certainly not maximizing our odds of finding the one that we were missing.
Yeah, that's true. And I really appreciate that, and I think, those areas, of course, are beautiful in their own right. And going to Kakadu is kind of I think what struck me too is my, memory had faded, and I didn't remember the distance between the different sites. It's like woodland for, hundreds of miles. And then all of a sudden you see not hundreds of miles, but many miles. Yeah. And then you see a rock outcrop, and I mean, obviously there's a lot of rock outcrops through that area, but the access to those, we were discussing there was a spot where we could have jumped off the road and hiked a few miles and gotten into some really cool, escarpment country, but there's no road going in there. And, hiking in there would have been pretty miserable in the heat of the day, or in the light, and going in after dark would have been kind of sketchy too, not knowing, not having a trail or not having a clear access point. But seeing that there'd been some studies there and there'd been records of, cool animals, it would be neat to go explore those areas, but that would take a little bit more planning and thought and research to make that happen. I kind of did that on my own, and I didn't really bring it up to you until kind of last minute, but I didn't think it was going to be a realistic goal. But and in other areas, you're just prohibited from going there, right? So you could park and go see, but there's signs that say do not get off the road, and which is frustrating. I guess that's kind of East Coast herping versus West Coast herping a little bit, where in certain areas you're just not allowed to go places. And, now they're starting to put up gates and, all sorts of things to prevent that. So that can be difficult when you've planned something and then come to find out, oh, that plan is not achievable because of this or that or the other, or they tell you not to walk on the rocks. So you're limited in your searching to a trail that goes in a loop, and you kind of walk the loop how many times and you go, okay, we didn't see it, but was it waiting for me just on top of those rocks, or, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. I mean, and that makes me think in a way that I hadn't conceived previously, because the paradigm's so different. But maybe, so Kakadu, it's, all this national park, but there is still access restrictions and things. In some ways, when you're talking about the distance between things, all of this feels very West Texas, right?
Yeah, right.
Which is very odd, because it's, all private land as opposed to all being this national park. But in terms of the actual practicalities of it, it actually really reminds me of that, of well, we're in place X, and the distance to go to place Y to do an alternative is pretty profound, limited access for entirely different reasons, all this stuff. But yeah, I wouldn't have put those two together because they seem so different in terms of in terms of the experience. I appreciate that. Yeah.
And I think too, Western Australia seemed a little easier to be able to do some of that, get off road or although, of course, by the cities, there's more eyes and people, but I mean, I was up in, I don't know if if you're not allowed or if it's even against the rules, you probably can go up there at dark. And I was, up with a flashlight, kind of just on the edge of town, up in the rocks, looking around for stuff. And somebody could have seen me up there and reported me or whatever, but I didn't have any issues that way. But, you don't know if, hey, should I be doing this in view of all these people? They're going to, come and question me, or maybe, and in the context of, some of the experiences, that Corey had on her trip over there, and crazy. We had to have her back on to talk about that. I'd love to hear that. It'd be interesting, but, that kind of aspect of, there are some pretty serious consequences if people are alleging that you're collecting or, handling reptiles when you shouldn't be and things like that. So I don't know. It's a tricky kind of a fine line. You got to be careful. And, so getting out into remote areas where there isn't anybody, and you can kind of go hike off the side of the road if you want, and nobody's going to question you or come checking on you or something. That there's some nice aspects of that, and Western Australia surely lends itself to that, I think, and aside from a few, more heavily visited areas, but yeah.
Absolutely. Well, what about you? Anything?
Yeah, I mean, same kind of thing. I love seeing the season kind of come alive over in Australia and see, all the posts and things like that. That's been really nice. I think I had a thought earlier, but it's left my head. So I think getting up early is not advantageous to me, especially staying up late. But yeah, I think same kind of thing, just seeing the cool stuff that people are finding, and has been nice. Seeing some friends have some really good success over there is really exciting. Right. Yeah. Oh, there was that, who found it? Alex, I think, found a black-headed python. Was it Alex? No, it was not. It was, Ryan Hart, posted a black-headed python that he found up in far north Queensland that was kind of aberrant looking, kind of a different looking pattern and stuff. And so I asked him, is that typical for that area? He's like, no, it's kind of weird looking. So that was kind of cool. Check out Ryan Hart's find, black-headed python find. That was one that kind of stuck out to me. And then just some other fun things that I'll probably save for future episodes, because they involve some of our guests and some of the things that I've been thinking about, since we're going to have Joe Mendelson on here soon. And he was a herpetologist at Utah State, and then he moved to Zoo Atlanta. And so kind of those that move, and we're going to have him on more of less in a Reptile Fight Club context and more of a student of the serpent context, where we can kind of talk about his career and kind of some of the main things that he's found. He's really, really involved with amphibian declines and things. So I don't know how that's going to work out. I guess we still need to work that out with Eric and figure out how
presentation and things.
Yeah, kind of overlap, but I will recommend listening to that once it comes out, if we can make that happen. He was very willing and had a date in the next couple of weeks in mind, but we're going to be gone I'm going to be gone with my family, so we're not able to make that work. But we'll get him on here soon and have a nice discussion. He's like the coolest herpetologist I've ever met. He's like just like a rock star, fun, Ramones type, like cool guy. So should be a good discussion. So I'm looking forward to that. And then hopefully we'll get Jordan Parrott on here soon. I can't believe we haven't had him on before. I know, right? Yeah, he's a really accomplished and cool field herper and just a great friend. So looking forward to having him on once he gets back from Australia and settled back in. So
that'll be great.
Other than that, I think we can wrap it up and thank the Morelia Pythons Radio umbrella for hosting us and letting us put out this content. And thank you guys for listening, and we'll catch you again next time for Reptile Fight Club.